Good morning, moms of Master Books. Hope you're having a good week. Hey, today I want to talk about the new cumulative record we have available. It's taken me a little bit longer to bring it out, but we've got it available. And let's see, I'm a little bit trying to manage a few things at once on here. Okay, so the cumulative record is very simply the record-keeping kit that you can use if you don't have a system already to make sure that you have kind of a record-keeping system in place for your student. So very simply, it comes in its loose leaf. It's the format it comes printed. You can also buy it digital. The printed version is $8.99 retail. I think on the site it's $7.19 right now. The digital version is $6.99. It comes 3-ring punch, so it's easy to throw into a 3-ring binder. And when I show you the presentation of it, it'll be in a 3-ring binder. So when we started homeschooling, I don't know, 25 years ago, it was a different climate. And so families that were homeschooling had to be careful of making sure that we had our T's crossed and our I's dotted, right? That if somebody called CPS on your family or they saw your kids outside playing and the truancy officer showed up or whatever, you wanted to make sure that you were well covered. And so, and we still do encourage families to belong to HSLDA because they support the homeschooling movement, but also because if there's ever a question, it's awesome to have them as a resource where you can call them and say, hey, the school district is asking me to provide this. And we've even had times where HSLDA would send a letter to the school district and say, you know, respectfully, this isn't required by law. And sometimes the school districts were just ignorant, and HSLDA was very helpful. So, but you just never know. You never know when somebody may think that they're helping and make a call or that type of thing. And having documentation that shows that you've taken the education of your children seriously is important. In New York, where I'm most familiar, but I believe this to be true in most places, you had school districts, and the superintendent of the school district is responsible for the education of the children in that district. Now, some laws allow private school, or they allowed homeschooling, or they allowed different things, but we still all had to report to the superintendent. We had to let him know that we were educating our students. When I was the principal of a private school, we had to keep academic records for each student, that what they were teaching, what their grades were, how many days they had attended school, so that at any time we could prove that the student had completed 5th grade, spent the right amount of days in school, done the academic work, that type of thing. Same with homeschooling. And there's a lot of right ways to keep records. There's a lot of suggestions. But what we've created here is kind of a basics that if you did this, you would have a record to show somebody that, yep, here's all the information I have, my academic record for this student. I think at the end of a student's career in school, if you will, I think it'd be great to be able to give them a binder with this information in it that they could keep. But can I say I wouldn't give that over to them? I would maintain that for your own records. My last assignment as a pastor, actually the school had closed and had been closed for probably 5 years, but I still got countless requests from colleges and students who had later in life decided to go to school but needed to have their high school transcripts. And so we'd have to crawl up into the attic and dig through the file records to find, you know, all of their information. So so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of what's available in this record kit. This is something that possibly if we find things that additional ideas and things like this, they may continue to evolve, even though that's not a word we use much around here with Master Books and a creationist mindset. But we may continue to develop as we find areas that we can help provide tools and resources for moms and dads to better homeschool with. So what I'm going to do, let me I'll show you what I did. I took this packet, right? There's a cover page and then table of contents and whatnot. And I took that packet and I put it in a 3-ring binder, a simple 3-ring binder. And you could do this a number of different ways. I know Kristen has said she would keep a folder for each year and take one of the academic records and stick it in that folder. You could have it in a 3-ring binder and maintain that. There's a lot of ways you could use this and adapt it to fit the needs of your homeschool. So let me switch over. Okay. So in a 3-ring binder, pretty easy to go through. And what this includes in this set, so we have your basics. There's an introduction, student information. Student information, as you'll see, there's even place to do fingerprints if you wanted to. The grade records for everywhere from pre-K to 12th grade. You don't need to have a pre-K grade record, but we did include it. And then a blank transcript where you can maintain. Now, when we provide this, we expect that you would most likely make copies of these, or you could buy one per student type thing, but you may want to make a copy and have one as a rough draft that you use, and then have one that you use as a permanent record, however works best for your family. Then we've added some templates that may be valuable for your family to have. A blank grade record, science lab report. What should labs, when you're saying we took chemistry with labs, having some lab reports to document what those labs look like, what you're looking for. We'll go over that. The reading list. Some students may more than fill this out, but I think it'd be interesting to know what books and what literature did a student read during their academic career. Field trip record. Some of the field trips we took as homeschoolers definitely expanded our children's knowledge. And we talk back now about the field trips that we took, and that it'd be interesting to have had some records of those field trips. Curriculum planning, a daily schedule. There's a blank daily schedule. A certificate of completion, that if you wanted to make a copy of the certificate of completion, say, hey, you completed this book on this day, congratulations. Just a very basic certificate of completion. Progress report is a report card. For a season, we gave our kids report cards. And then the kids, when I came home from work, they would bring the report card to me, and they'd have the stress of having to go through the report card. And that, again, all these aren't expected to be used. These are just some tools that may be helpful. There's a sample transcript filled out, so you kind of have a template of what a transcript would look like. Math objectives for grades, I think it's 1st through 6th, some language objectives, and then some scriptures that you can use to guide for guidance. So, okay. So the first, in the introduction, and this is what I love about this, and we actually, one of our moderators, Carity, helped put this together, and I think she had a brilliant idea. She built the planner on a scripture. The scripture is Luke 2:52, and Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And if we take that, there's 4 things that he grew and matured in. It was intellect, his physical body, his spiritual, as he grew in favor with God, and then with man, his social skills. And so we have 4 characteristics that are talked about in Jesus's growth, and that's what we use in the planner. Is there's 4 different characteristics of growth: the intellect, the academic, the physical growth, the spiritual growth, and the social growth. And so I think it's a great it's just a great tie-in to keeping a record for your students. Okay, so and then there's some more information in how to use it and that type of thing. We have basic student information. So name, birthday, birthplace, parent, guardian, the parents, the fingerprints if you wanted to, identifying characteristics, any home addresses, the years that you live there. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be something that you have to keep. Let me see. Family photo, any immediate family members, schools that may have been attended, homeschool mission statement. again, this is something that, like in a permanent record, for the schools that we had, we kept this. If anything happened to a family member or somebody had to step in and help, having information might be helpful. And you may add to this. You may have, this is a very basic sheet, but you have some other things like if you have vaccinations or medical that you want to include in this, just a good way to keep everything together in one place. So some basic student information. Then we move into the student record. Preschool it's all in here, but I'm going to move for the sake of, let me look at, say, first grade. So first grade, we have the intellectual, growing in knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and wisdom. What are the basic subjects that we take? And for us, we have the basic 4 package, right? Where we have math, language, science, and social studies. And so we have those. And then you can give a grade for the first semester, second semester, or final grade. Now, your record keeping could be completely, it's up to you how to do this. So you could actually do just, hey, here's my final grade. It's it was a 95 or a B, that type of thing. And then the curriculum that was used. So for math lessons for a living education, language lessons for a living education, history, we used My Story 1, science, adventures, and creation. And then maybe we did a more than words for Bible. So we Bible more than words. Or we did, Bible morning basket, something like that. So that gives us an idea. This is the curriculum we use. So here are the grades, the curriculum, their strengths. They grasp things quickly, and we're able to memorize basic skills. What are some of the challenges that they faced? Maybe they didn't pay attention for very long, hadn't developed stamina, some motor skills needed to be developed. Any literature books that had been completed, you could also use this section for any additional notes. Days in attendance. Now, as for most homeschoolers, there's 180 days of attendance required. A lot of people want to know how to do that. Sometimes you do it on a calendar. Sometimes you would use just, here's your schedule. Did you deviate from it? I think for most of us, we know that we homeschool 180 days plus because we're always homeschooling. And it's not a huge, they don't typically want to see the calendar, but everything I say, make sure you check with HSLDA and your state laws to know what your requirements are. But it's good to keep a record of how many days in attendance your students had. Were there any comments? Like maybe they had some hospital visits or family members, some things came up, some extra sickness or something like that. And so we keep a record of that. On the back of that, we have the physical growth, growing in stature, weight, height, hours of physical education. How many hours of that? What are their physical strength successes? Like, are they developing in motor skills? Can they jump? Can they run? Can they do that? Did they have any challenges? Maybe still coordination is a challenge. You'd put a photo in of their first grade if you'd wanted to. And then, let's see, biblical apologetics for their spirit. Then we go to spiritual record, growing in favor with God. Biblical apologetics. Did we just study the Bible, 10-minute Bible journey? Maybe we used elementary apologetics, something like that. Spiritual strengths and successes. Maybe they are sensitive to good and evil, truth and lies. Spiritual challenges. Maybe they're struggling to tell the truth. Anything like that. Social record, growing in favor with man. Did they do anything outside? Like maybe they went to Awana or Royal Rangers or something like that they participated in. Social strengths and skills. Maybe they have an awareness. They want to help people and care for people who are the underdogs. Or if it had been mine, maybe they're a bully and need some more discipline. So you can see, though, if you took just a little bit of time at the end of the school year or during the school year to keep this academic record, how in 10 years or when they're 25 or when they have kids, and you could pull this out and say, this is what your first grade record looks like. I have a couple of my report cards from first grade. Funny, this probably most of the things teachers said were my strengths and weaknesses have continued to be. They weren't always right. Their weakness in their class turned out to be my strength in life. But, it's interesting to look back and say, well, this is what the perception of me was when I was in first grade. So this is pretty much in the student information. It follows the same format. One of the things that I really like in this, I don't know, you probably won't be able to see it real well. Let's see. Oh, yes, you can. Okay, so one of the things, this page, actually, it's designed, if you buy the print, but it's designed so that the grade is all on one sheet. So you could take the sheet and you could put it in a file folder as well. If you did it that way, it wouldn't have to be in a 3-ring binder. But one of the, it's just a tiny thing that the designer did that I thought was really cool. She built this with seeds being planted, seeds being watered and nurtured in first grade, the sun and environment beginning, a little sprout coming up in third grade, more of a sprout, developing into some petals, growing stronger, continuing the growth and process in 8th grade. And you see this plant beginning throughout the school year, or beginning throughout the years, getting stronger and bigger. So then we come to 9th grade. Now, 9th grade typically is where you would want to start keeping academic records of transcripts. I think 15 is, if somebody knows for sure, they can correct me. I thought it was age 15. I'm second guessing myself, but 15 or 9th grade, or if you've done the work like high school equivalent work in 8th grade, you want to make sure that that's going on a transcript. But in this, same thing. The 4 core subjects, your math, your language. So typically it would be, math would be algebra, language with writing strands, history. And these don't actually have to say the specific, right? It could be math, algebra, language, composition, history, world history, science, biology. That would be what you have. Now, if you wanted to include what books you used for that, you could. But typically, I would do that on this. I would probably put what books I used for each subject to substantiate that I used a high school level course. Academic strengths, attendance, physical, spiritual strengths, and challenges, and then social. And so that would be for each of the grades. You have your basic, and then 12th grade, you have a tree with fruit on it, and I love that concept. And then there's a basic transcript. And so the transcript is what's going to be your most important for like college, anything like that, what they want to see. Did the student do high school equivalent work? What were their grades? That type of thing. So a basic transcript is here. School name, like for us, would have been Rehoboth Academy, the student's name, birthday, address, maybe the date of graduation. And some of this, you would continue to maintain this over the 4 years. What was the GPA? So this would be total. So what did they do for math? Typically, you would have 4 math credits, right? You have maybe a pre-algebra or algebra, geometry, and then an advanced math and of 1 or 2 levels, or maybe consumer math or accounting, something like that. Language lessons, you could just have, it was 2016, 17, 18, 19, English 1, English 2, English 3, English 4, 95, if it would have been my grades, 95, 95, 95, 95, and on. History, I wouldn't recommend necessarily putting the book title. I would put the course description. So the course title for history would be American history, world history, worldviews or anthropology, something like that would count as a history credit. And then your sciences, biology, chemistry, physical science, maybe life science. You could have, or astronomy. Those would be 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we've got 4 designated in that area because that's typically what you would do. And then there's electives. So you could have music and phys ed, any of those type of things that you would have electives earned. And then volunteer areas of service. Now we have a transcript in the back that has, it's just basically completed, a fictional completion. So you would have something to follow. Then on the back of the transcript, maybe any standardized tests. Do they take achievement tests, California achievement test, or any of those type of things? And what were the scores? Admission tests, ACTs, SATs, PSATs, what tests did they take? What records did they have? Any other tests that they might have taken, maybe the military test or a career test. Maybe even like if you did the Briggs-Meyer or the Enneagram or something like that, that you wanted to keep a record of that they had tested for career placement, that'd be a great place to put that. Any previous schools, if they weren't homeschooled for their whole life, that they might have attended, what high schools they had attended, and then any additional information that would be helpful for somebody who would be seeing this. And then the name of the preparer. You want to have the parent name, school principal, your phone number and email address so that they can get in touch with you. So that would be the core records that you would use in this. Then we go to the templates and teacher resources. And there's a blank grade worksheet. And in that grade worksheet, it's what I would recommend is if you kept that and you could print that off to replace one if it needed to, or you could print that off, use it as a draft copy, fill that all out, and then once at the end of the year, once it's all the way you want it, you could transfer that to to the official record in the front. Let's see, science lab report. So in a science labs, what are labs, right? So we have the name, the experiment. Maybe the experiment is to check pressure or explosions, the lab date, the subject being chemistry. What do you expect to learn? We expect to learn that when 2 elements are put together, there's going to be an explosion, whatever. Hypothesis, predict the outcomes of the experiment. It must be an if then. If I add vinegar to baking soda, then there will be pressure built up and released. Procedure, what steps did we take to accomplish it? So I had a bottle, we added the vinegar to the baking soda. These are the materials: baking soda, vinegar, bottle, cork with nail in it, whatever that experiment looks like. The results: explosion, cork stuck into the ceiling, that type of thing. And then conclusion, what conclusion can you draw from the results of this lab assignment? Now there's a lot of different type of lab reports and that type of thing. This is just a generic one that you could use to begin teaching your children to think about the scientific method, right? Why are we doing this? What is the hypothesis? What procedure do we use? What were the results? What did we see? Does it match with a conclusion? Did it match the hypothesis? And so it's just a very basic science lab report. But if you did this for the lab experiments and you just kept a record, or at least had some proof that you had done labs, that's one way to do it. A reading list is very simple: title, author, genre, date completed. Like I said in the beginning, not everything's expected to be used, just some things that would be helpful. Field trips, destination, the date, and the highlights. And maybe activities, if there were some extra activities that were, they participated in a debate club in the debate, or they did some of the Bible bee or a spelling bee or a chess club, you could keep a note of that. Curriculum planning, because we love curriculum planning. We're talking, you could print this off every year. And so we're looking at subject, right? Math, what are we looking at? What is the cost? And it just gives us a way to kind of develop curriculum for each child. Our lesson plans at the beginning of the courses are awesome. And so we included a blank one that if there was a title or something that wasn't necessarily Master Books, but you really enjoy the way that we do our lesson plan, you could use this. It's broken down over 180 days. Typically, you would take, you would take the total number of pages, divide it by 180 days, then you have to figure out like how many tests and quizzes and stuff like that factors into it. So maybe you divide the total number of pages by 160, and that gives you 20 days for studying, tests, quizzes, anything like that. Let's see. Okay. So that's a blank 180-day schedule. Certificate of completion, just a very basic certificate of completion that you could make copies of. Of course, there's tons of templates as well, but this is just very easy to say, hey, every time my kid completes a course, or maybe we put a challenge before them, they're going to memorize certain scripture, I can give a certificate of completion, and hey, I'm proud of you as your high school principal or high school teacher or elementary, graduated level 6, and so that's one way to do it. A progress report. Now this page, actually, let me see if I can find. This would be the equivalent of a report card, what some of us would have had as report cards that had attended school. And the way it's designed is, I'll show you like here. So front and back, right? We'll go like this. This would be the front, this would be the back. This would be first semester, second semester. The page can be folded in half. And the idea with this is make copies of this. Students name the year 2019. When you open it up, you have subject math, language, history, science, Bible, phys ed, art, music, what are the grades for first semester, first 9 weeks, second 9 weeks? You could just do semester totals. What's the average? How many hours approximately? The days, the date and parent signature. And so the student could actually have a progress report that you give them. And then on the back would be your assessment. So for the first 9 weeks, it follows directions. Excellent, good, satisfactory, needs improvement. Works well, does not disturb others, takes care of materials, completes work required. So you can actually give a progress report. Now, something you could do is just this back sheet. You could do just this for the students. So you know what, every 9 weeks, I'm going to give you an assessment of your performance. Why do I think that's something that is valuable? Because that's what we do in life. So I think it's healthy to know who we are as individuals, how others perceive us, because sometimes we can get narrow vision and believe our perception is the reality, and sometimes that isn't always the case. And I think it's good to teach our kids that others are evaluating us, because our bosses will evaluate us, our college professors will evaluate us, our peers will evaluate us, our spouses will evaluate us, and are there areas that we can improve and grow in, and that type of thing. So this would be something you could do as a resource to give your kids, hey, you've worked hard this year, this is your report card. And maybe you do even make it something where this is something that when dad, we make it an issue where you have it where they have to present it to dad. And this is, if dad isn't necessarily scoring the work and active in everything, there's a 9-week progress report that they go and say, here's how I did in school. I think for some families too, this may actually help dad feel that schooling is being done, right? Because some dads are concerned that their kids aren't getting everything they need to. If they were to get a progress report every 9 weeks that showed that, that may be something that would help them feel more comfortable, because it's close to the experience that they have as an adult. So then we have a blank sample transcript where you have algebra, geometry, algebra 2, a trig, calculus, English 1, 2, 3, 4, the grades, the credits earned, U.S. history, world history, civics and economics, U.S. history 2, science, engineering, biology with labs, astronomy, chemistry with labs, 4 credits earned. Then a listing of all the electives that they took for those years. And let's see, and then volunteers, children's church teacher, piano player with the church worship team. They did missions, a remodel of a church. And so on their transcript, that gives, they earned a total of 26.5 credits. They graduated from Smith Christian Academy with a grade point average of 3.96. And then on the back, they took the California Achievement Test 3 years in a row. They did the Scholastic Achievement Test, the SAT, in June of 2019. There were no previous attendance. There's no additional information, but it gives you a kind of something to follow and know. When you're doing a transcript, just something to look at and say, oh, is that how they did it and worked with it? Okay. Then we moved to the math checklist. And what we did is Carity went through and looked at what Master Books requires at each grade level and the scope and sequences. And so when you come to grade 1, what are the objectives that we can learn? Can they write their numbers 0 to 100? Can they identify numbers in ones, tens, 100 places and tell what they stand for? Can they tell where the hands on a clock should point in a given time? And so it gives the objectives that a first grader have. And you can even, there's a checklist. So if you want to know, is my first grader doing first grade material and able to prove it and demonstrate it? Once they do, you do that checklist. That gives you a really good opportunity to say, well, this is what the expectations are for a first grader, and our first grader can do that if you're following the averages and stuff like that. I don't think I would be worried at this level if not all of that was done, but it gives you kind of some ballparks on that. It's interesting. I just saw a comparison of curriculums, and somebody, the publisher said, this is what we teach, and this is what the top 5 homeschool curriculums teach. We're flattered that we were on that list, that we were considered one of the top 5 homeschool math curriculums. And they were showing everything they had. And it's impressive, but here's what I would say about your math curriculums would be, it's not what you teach, it's what they learn. So I can try to teach algebra to a first grader, but if they don't learn it because they haven't developed the critical thinking abilities and abstract tools to dissect abstract concepts, it doesn't matter what you teach them. I mean, I can take an algebra book, I can take my Jacobs algebra book, and I can say, well, this is what I'm teaching my first grader this year. It doesn't mean they're going to learn it. So what's most important is what they're learning more than what we're trying to teach them, right? So think of that when you hear, well, how does this compare? And I think this curriculum's behind and everything else, because our approach is a little bit gentler in the beginning as we work them up, but I believe all of our curriculum follows the traditional scope and sequence that you find with all of the top box curriculums. But the way that we approach it is we build on the foundations and build on application. And that gives it so that by the time they reach algebra, this curriculum that is saying, well, in kindergarten, we teach so much, I would say if you can do Jacobs algebra and Jacobs geometry, which students are transitioning into perfect, coming out of principles of mathematics, coming out of math lessons for living education, then you have given your student an exceptional math education. So I just went off on a tangent about that. I'm sorry. Okay, let me go back. Okay, language objectives. We got some of the same type of things. Grade 1, can they recognize all upper and lowercase letters? Can they recognize many phonics blends? Can they identify several sight words? Can they copy or write one or more sentences? Can they read selected words from books? Can they describe aspects of a picture? Can they match the picture to a sentence? Can they write the missing picture in a word when shown a picture? And so there's just some basic objectives that if they can do this in first grade and second grade, and we don't go all the way to 12th grade. I think with math, it's up through grade 7. With language, it's up through grade 6 and some of the basics. And that will give you some kind of a standard of, as a parent, this is what the expectations are. Are they learning this material? And is there any areas maybe that we need to reinforce or whatnot? The last thing is scripture for guidance. And just some scriptures. The first one, Luke 2:52, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and favor with God and man. That's the fourfold areas of growth. And it's interesting because the same was said about Samuel. Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and also with man. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from it. Just some really great scriptures that Carity put together for education, and that the homeschool families should kind of have in our toolbox. And so that is the academic record, the cumulative academic record that we've put together. Again, the print version is $7.19. The digital version is $6.99. If you buy the digital version and you print it, you're going to have to play with your printer a little bit to get the sheets front and back and that type of thing. But I think this will help some of the families who are just kind of, what do I do? How do I keep some basic records for my family so that I can show them, this is the math you did, these are the grades you got, these were your areas of strength and weaknesses, and you continue to grow, and we addressed it. Remember you started taking Awanas in grade 3, and then you went on a missions trip in grade 8, and you went to the city mission in grade 9 and for Thanksgiving and those type of things, and you have this that's so easy to forget as life moves on. So we're hoping it's a resource that will really help, if nothing else, inspire you to begin setting up your own method. A lot of people use digital worksheets and spreadsheets and that type of thing, and we think that's fantastic. This is written for the person that's just like, I don't even know where to start in record keeping. And a lot of families do it differently. Kristen saves all of the schoolwork. At the end of the school year, it goes into a bin, and we buy a clear Tupperware bin, and we save all of their books, worksheets, art projects, everything. So we even have that as a record that, look, here's 5 kids worth of schoolwork for the year, all their books, worksheets, projects, everything is in that. And then it's easy enough to go back through if we had to substantiate the work was being done. It's not as much of a concern now, but I think as homeschoolers, we need to hold ourselves accountable, right? We have to be careful with certain methodologies that come of say unschooling. Most people don't realize that to unschool effectively, it takes more work. You have to actually make sure that the objectives are being reached for certain, and benchmarks are being reached. It's not just, we're just going to study something obscure. We have to make sure that we're reaching the benchmarks and the milestones that are expected of us as educators. And all of us have an accountability to each other. We have to strive for excellence in learning, because we give homeschooling a good name or a bad name. You know that when you live in a community where 5 people are excelling in homeschooling, but one family is saying they're not getting it, right? And everybody in the community knows that. How do they judge the homeschool community? Do they judge the homeschool community by the 5 families who are getting it right, or by the one family who isn't? They always point to the family that isn't. And in order for the homeschooling movement to stay healthy and continue moving forward, I believe, personal conviction, we have an obligation, each of us, to each other, to set high standards for our families, so that when people think of homeschooling in Green Forest, Arkansas, or wherever you may live, that they say that family stands out. Their kids are well-mannered. They grew academically, physically, spiritually, and socially. And we're purposeful about that. And so the record keeping is a way for us to actually have a measuring stick of how well we're doing that with each student, and being purposeful about that. So my encouragement is, even if this doesn't work for you, be sure to do something to make sure that you're measuring your progress, your success, and your growth, because it's important for all of us. And as a publisher of a curriculum like Master Books, we encourage that you take standardized tests, and just, even if you don't have to report it, just so you have peace of mind and your student is familiar with taking a test. And we love seeing the test results, because we see that the results are coming back where students are a grade or 2 grades ahead of where they were. So we're not afraid of that. And I don't think you should be either. Doesn't mean every kid, we still hold to grades are just approximations. There is no such thing as average. Educate to the needs of the student, tailor the education to fit your homeschool method. But we do have to be aware of the greater picture, that people are watching us. And it's interesting here, even in the office, we have people who have backgrounds in education and public education, and they're watching my family or families that are homeschooling all the time and saying, how does that family conduct themselves? How do they, are they actually learning, and all of these things. So again, another tangent, but I pray, and I'm on one screen. Let's see, there we go. So technical difficulties today.